Now, as you all probably know, we had a steering committee to assist us in moving through this process. And the following slides essentially reflect from yesterday's meeting the areas or the issues that the steering committee came to general consensus on in terms of what they thought they would like to see coming out of that. So I thought it was important to share this with the group. This one started off kind of late, but it actually moved quickly to the top of the list. And basically, one of the recommendations from the steering committee was to have a defined parking plan for the opening of Harrison Square by February 15th. And that's regardless of progress on the rest of these organizational issues. But no matter what, we really need to get to work on having a good plan for traffic dispersal and parking information. We got this image here that shows kind of a sandwich type sign that's going to be used to promote where parking is available around the park. And there'll be multiple options for parking for that. The steering committee liked the idea of a parking commission as opposed to an authority, and that's kind of a technical distinction there, but I guess the issue there in my mind was an authority is essentially where we're handing off the responsibility for parking to a separate board. And while they thought that having community input was very important, they didn't necessarily feel like we needed to create a whole separate authority entity. And we'll talk more about the organizational options here shortly. But they also thought that this parking commission body, in whatever form it takes, should be more than advisory. Pretty early on, the idea that the parking authorities tend to have bonding capacity for building new parking structures. That idea was pretty much taken off the table early on in our discussions, and the thought was that the responsibility for development of new parking facilities should be retained in the redevelopment agency, redevelopment commission. They did, however, feel pretty strongly that the parking commission be given the authority to set parking rates and fines. And again, this is the steering committee, a group of your peers that sat in on endless parking meetings. These are some of the thoughts that they came out with. The idea is that they gelled some consensus around. They thought it was really important that this parking commission serve as a central clearinghouse for parking information and a central source for referral for all parking issues. And I think this is really an important issue. If you had a parking issue, if we went around the room and said, who would you call if you had a parking issue, we'd probably get 10 or 15 different names out of it, and some of them probably are helping you. But if all of those people called one person, it all got funneled through one person whose responsibility it was to manage that, they would get a perspective on parking issues that you just currently don't have right now. And I think that's an important piece. Another important thing that they liked was the idea that this parking commission and this parking agency will play a key role in sort of being the public educator on parking issues. You know, what can parking do to help us downtown? What can't it do? What are the new technologies available? What are the pros and cons of looking at some of these? Out of those guiding principles, the committee felt very strongly that they really kind of liked the idea that the parking system would be customer-oriented, not violator-oriented. Now, parking enforcement is always going to be an important role, and it's always going to be a confrontational role. It's inherently negative, but there's no way around it. But you really need that function. But are there ways that we can provide that function and be a little less kind of violator focused? And there are lots of ways. We've got examples from other communities that we've shared. They thought it was important that this parking entity be an active partner and supporter of downtown development and revitalization goals, and I think that's true. I think one of the key reasons for looking at this particular time is getting ready for Harrison Square and being prepared for that with a really good parking plan, in addition to all the other plans that you need to open a stadium like that. They think the parking system should ultimately, it's a goal that they want to set. They know they probably can't achieve it in the first year or 2 years even, but ultimately look at the possibility of trying to make the parking system self-sustaining. Basically taking the role of providing parking infrastructure off the backs of the taxpayers. And if the system can be essentially paid for by users, that's a great thing. We've been able to do that in lots of other communities around the country. Selected downtown stakeholders should participate in the selection process for the new parking director position, if one is hired. And so if there is a process to hire someone, if it gets approved that someone is hired to manage this position as we recommended, that they would like to be involved, or they think it would be smart to have some of the downtown stakeholders involved in that selection process. Assessment and investment in new parking technology should be supported and encouraged. We've talked a lot about different technologies from around the country that have really improved efficiency and effectiveness and customer service in downtowns around the country, and I think that some of those examples people got really excited about. The Parking Commission and the Parking Director will be tasked with overall system planning and coordination. Again, that planning function is really a critical piece here. I think it's one of the missing pieces we have right now in terms of a comprehensive approach to managing parking as a system. Again, there's good management going on within the small sectors that we have right now, but it's not, nobody's managing all those pieces as one system. The parking program will be effective in communicating and coordinating with downtown stakeholders. You know, it's been an interesting process. They've evolved their own parking advisory committee already to be working on several issues, and I think they've found that's been very effective and very positive, and I think that they'd like to see that progress continue. Current parking enforcement department staff will be integrated as a critical function in the new consolidated department. We don't see anybody losing their job over this. We see this as just being an integrated and kind of an overall policy umbrella that pulls all the various pieces together as kind of a hold harmless clause for existing parking staff, and everybody felt like that was there was consensus around that. The parking program will develop a complementary and supportive relationship with Transit and CityLink. And again, we are very supportive conceptually of that. We like to think about what we really want to manage is access to downtown and not think about parking in isolation and separate from everything else. So parking is just one of the access management elements we would look at in conjunction with transit and others. So that was another one that the committee agreed on. The parking program will develop a collaborative and supportive relationship with private parking management firms and owners of private parking assets. One of the things we've seen in the communities is where we have a consolidated parking system, they tend to do a better job of working with private parking owners and operators to make some of those assets available for special events and for after hours events and for retail support, those kind of things. If you work with somebody and say, we'll take care of the maintenance and we'll have a contract in place and we'll share the revenue with you, those kind of things, you can actually use some of those parking assets for public purposes and maybe put off the need for building more parking long term. The parking program will focus on enhanced efficiencies and optimization of current assets through improved management and technology. I think this was a really important theme to the group, that they saw this initiative as a way of just being more efficient and effective in the delivery of parking management services overall, and again, in a more comprehensive way. So that was the items that the steering committee came to some level of consensus on. Any questions about any of that? Any discussion before we talk about some recommendations?